Hey folks, I'm Sir Vainglory here with another Anatomy of a Battle video for Steel Division Normandy 44. And this is a battle between the 12th SS-Panzer Division and the 3rd Canadian Division on the Cheux map. So the Cheux map's a nice open map which makes planning a bit easier. There's only the one real key point, which is the town at the midway line on the right hand side of the map. So I plan to concentrate my infantry there with artillery and eventually tanks coming up in support, and I figured that the wide open spaces to the left could be held by a few anti-tank guns until I could gather tanks and infantry there to force up into the Canadian territory. So I expected to be up against a fair amount of armoured cars and anti-tank units, so it's essential that I got my own anti-tank guns deployed early. So I identified a few locations just short of the midway point where I could set them up to cover the approach roads to the left and centre of the map. And I also sent recce troops beyond the anti-tank guns to give me plenty of warning of any Canadian approaches. In the town I wanted to get my troops into defensive positions as far forward as I could. I wanted to be able to hold off the initial Canadian push and into the town and then advance further forward into the buildings that gave me control over the open ground beyond the town. So after the last video I received a lot of helpful comments and advice about armoured battle groups and playing armoured divisions. So having tweaked my battle group, I was keen to try it out and bring you guys the results. Unfortunately I couldn't find an online opponent who was willing to play as the allies in a 1v1 when the sort of time frame that I had. So I decided to play against hard AI instead and see how I got on against that. A couple of the main changes that I made to the battle group were to get rid of the Panzer Grenadier Führer units and replace them with more motorised Panzer Grenadier squads, and I also swapped out the SDKFZ 250/8 for SPW 223 command cars instead, and both of those changes helped immensely in the battle, particularly for the town. In terms of the battle, one of the main lessons I learned in the previous battle was the need for plenty of recce units. So I decided to send a recce squad along with each of the Pak 38s, and also sent a recce squad up on either side of the town. I figured that it was better to go for a bit of overkill and be able to absorb up any losses rather than be caught short. So along with the recce and the Paks, I had an SPW 223 command car and 4 units of Panzer Grenadiers in Opel Blitzes, and that was the limit of my forces. The first engagement happened here in the town on the road to the right. I managed to get my units into buildings, into position, as the 2 P8 teams here came forward in jeeps. They were caught in a crossfire and quite quickly destroyed. And over on the left, round about the same time, the 1st Canadian light armoured units were pushing forward down the 2 roads to the left. My guns were still getting into position as they appeared, but luckily 2 of them got in, 2 guns to the left, covering those roads, got into position in time and were able to engage the columns moving forward and halt both of the advances. So I quite like this second position coming up, this one here, where you're in a wee enclosed unit behind, or a closed area behind the wall and bushes. Quite a good spot for a gun. So by the town enemy were pushing forward to flank on the right, but in front of the town the vehicles were sort of stalled there, and my recce units had pushed forward. But the Canadians brought up a Wasp flamethrower on the left hand flank and it attacked my recce units there, which surrendered. But then both of the Pak 38s attacked that road, units in that road, and they took out the armoured car and the Wasp. And that put an end to the advance there for a bit. In the town, this Dingo scout car was pushing forward, unsupported, so as it moved into the town it ate an anti-tank round from the Panzer Grenadiers. That was the end of that. The loss of forward vision on the left hand side was a bit annoying, but the Pak had good enough lines of sight of its own, but I clearly needed some support up there for the guns. There's not an awful lot there advancing towards them at the moment, and the infantry that was there was forced to fall back by my recce squad, so I was quite pleased with that. And back at the town I decided to try and push forward my recce squad to the left, but as soon as it broke cover it was engaged by machine gun fire from an armoured car and infantry in the building ahead of it. I tried to pull them back behind the wall, but they got pinned down in the open there for a bit. So you can see there's a ram, I think, in the centre there that's pulled back. The Canadians did seem to be pulling back generally in the centre for some reason. I don't quite understand that. On the right hand side, my recce spotted an anti-tank gun and a P8 team moving forward. So I had to keep an eye on them, or try to at least. My first reinforcements were beginning to arrive on the left hand flank. Another change that I made was to swap out the Firefly from the battle group and bring in a Cromwell, so I brought that up to support the packs, particularly as I'd seen the Canadian anti-tank gun by the second of the two roads. Also brought up some more recce there. Cromwell's first target was to engage the anti-tank gun. That had been suppressed earlier by the recce squad, and you can see its level of stress is still pretty high, so I was hoping to be able to kill it before it got shot off. And the first shot from the Cromwell was enough to break the morale on the gun, and it forced it to fall back. The Pack 38 engaged an armoured car that had been brought up on the left hand road again. It took a couple of shots, but it was able to destroy it eventually. And the Cromwell completes the job on the anti-tank gun there. And then there was a second anti-tank gun appeared on the left hand side, along with an infantry squad, but the Cromwell's in position to be able to attack that as well, and it managed to suppress it. So in the town, my squads stayed in the positions where they weren't too vulnerable to long-range machine gun fire from the Canadians' vehicles. There is still Canadian infantry in the town, but out of sight at the moment. An enemy squad moved out of cover on the right of the town and is fired on in the open by a couple of the Panzer Grenadier squads. And over on the left, the Cromwell's now forced both the anti-tank gun and the rifle squad to fall back. So I've moved the Cromwell into position where it's got a bit more cover, but still has a good field of fire on both of the roads there. So again, finishes the job on that anti-tank gun. So I've brought up more infantry to reinforce the town, just as another assault is launched by the Canadians. And you can see that the command car is positioned to give each of the squads in the town an extra command staff. And it's a pretty fierce firefight rages here for a while, but I reckon I've got the advantage as I'm able to concentrate fire from several units onto individual Canadian units. On the far left, more vehicles coming forward. There's another Wasp flamethrower there taken out with a pack. And the command tank in the centre continues to stay well back, and it's pretty much ineffective from that position. So for now I'm pretty happy on the left, just to sit there and deal with any more advances, and in the town I'm continuing to hold off the enemy push. But the recce squad that was out on the right hand flank was captured eventually, so I need to get something up there to deal with that. There's clearly something on the right flank. The pack on the left and the Cromwell both fired at an armoured car that was moving up. And back in the town again, managed to force back and destroy most of the Canadian infantry. Own squads have taken a beating, but the command car's doing its job and it's keeping them in the fight. All the Canadians really have left are a couple of P8 teams with support from the distant vehicles. and the P8 teams are both eventually destroyed, and that town is now effectively mine. So the command unit there also fall back after the P8 teams were destroyed. So we're now getting towards phase B, and I'm happy with how the battle's gone so far. I've managed to win control of the town, and I've got 51% of the map. And it's round about this point where I look at the reinforcement points and I see the massive advantage the AI has in each phase. I hadn't realised that was part of the hard AI. So I'm bringing in a mortar to support the infantry in the town, and there's a flicker of stars, shows that the Canadians have brought up an HQ unit there. And that helps the infantry they retreated into cover to push forward again on the right hand side. On the left there's more vehicles approaching, and an anti-tank team moves out from the small clump of trees there. But the Cromwell's in a good position, one shot dispatches them. And back over on the right hand side, the Canadians have brought up a scout sniper. He's in one of the outlying buildings and is targeting the Panzer Grenadiers that I'm trying to move up to occupy the buildings on the edge of the town. It proves to be a bit of a nuisance. On the left hand side, the Cromwell continues to hold off the enemy infantry. An armoured car moves up and fires at the recce squad, so the Cromwell changes target to engage that instead. Accuracy is not the Cromwell's strongest point obviously, but getting HE rounds close enough will stress out the crew. And back over at the town, my mortar's now in position and behind the town, and the first thing I target is that sniper to try and dislodge him. I lose vision on him, but I don't think he's dead, so I switch targets to the infantry that's pressing in the right and try and suppress them instead. One round from the mortar is pretty much enough to suppress the squad as its morale was nearly broken and it's forced to fall back. So quite confident in the town for the moment. I'm moving up infantry reinforcements towards the town, as you can see, but the Canadians now have a big wedge of territory down the right hand flank. So I divert one of the half-tracks and Panzer Grenadier squads over to investigate that, try and find out what it is. And we've just entered phase B now. The mortar continues to harass the Canadian infantry, driving it back into the trees, but the Canadians also have more reinforcements heading in there, as you can see. As the Canadians fall back, I push this half-track up through the orchard to try and provide machine gun support to the squad that's on the edge of town in that building there. But as it moves up, it comes under fire from an anti-tank gun out in the right hand flank, and the first couple of shots miss it, but it's destroyed by the third shot. So I retask the mortar to try and take out that anti-tank gun that's right at the very edge of the tree line over on the right, and the first shot from the mortar lands right on the money. 6-pounders destroyed. So that was quite lucky. Over on the left, the Cromwell's continuing to shoot at the infantry, and the Panzer Grenadier squad that I'd tasked to investigate the right flank is making its way out there. But the best news is that I've got my first tanks on the way in now. I'm bringing in some Panzer IVs. So the infantry's pushing into the town again, and the snipers reappeared. There's more Canadian reinforcements moving up both in the town and on the left flank. There's a jeep pushing along the left side road, and it's engaged by the Pak-38. It drops off a flamethrower squad that moves in towards a clump of trees, but the Cromwell's still in position there lobbing HE shells, anything that moves out of that area. Doing quite an effective job. And in the town, I've held off the latest infantry attack, but there's a strong force now building up there with a couple of vehicle mounted MGs pinning my troops. So I dropped some mortar rounds where the Canadians are mustering and managed to pin the infantry. And with the vehicles having dropped back a bit, it gives me time for the Panzer Grenadiers to recover their morale. And they're able to pin a heavy machine gun that is moving across the open there towards the tree line. So the mortar was very effective, providing support and switching targets as and when it was needed. But the squad there comes under heavy fire from several units, and the sniper picks off the remains of the squad to the right of the town there. But I've got another squad that moves up into the building just this side of the road, hidden behind the hood there. It's still got a good field of fire on anything that moves towards the right hand flank. I've also tasked the mortar to drop some smoke rounds in front of the Canadians to disrupt their long range fire on the Panzer Grenadiers. My first Panzer IVs, as you can see, are now approaching. Oh sorry, I've already got a Panzer Grenadier up at the town, so this is another couple that I was bringing up. And the command car moved it slightly, but it's still doing the job of providing the extra leadership support. On the very far right, my Panzer Grenadier squad have pushed well forward without meeting any resistance. And over on the left, it looks like there's the first sign of a serious Canadian reinforcement there, with what looks like a Wolverine moving in. And there's another tank hunter moving in towards the town as well on the right. So, not too concerned about the Wolverine. I've got a couple anti-tank guns there to deal with it. This one on the left. So the Wolverine and the Cromwell engage each other. That was something that I didn't want to risk, so I decided to move the Cromwell out of line of sight and just leave anti-tank guns to deal with the tank hunter. And there are some truckloads of infantry following the Wolverine in. So the Pak 38 here engages them as they move up, forces them to just debust their infantry. Back in the town, I've now got the two Panzer IVs operating together on the right edge of the town, as the Canadians seem to want to try and get round that flank, and they're in a good position there to suppress any infantry that tries to move across into the trees on the right hand side. Back on the left, the Cromwell is now engaging the newly arrived infantry, and the Pak 38 and the Wolverine are exchanging fire. Unfortunately, the Wolverine's now also been joined by Sherman. The Pak's fire is quite accurate though, and it manages to increase the stress on both crews. But the Pak has eventually, the crew has suppressed itself. And I think with that shot, and the Sherman and the Wolverine both then start to move up. It looks like they're trying to get vision on the Cromwell. So they do exchange a bit of fire, but luckily the stress level in the Canadian vehicles from the Pak fire is still pretty high, and the shots from the Cromwell force the Wolverine to fall back. Quickly recovers though, and the Wolverine and the Sherman then both target the Pak over on the left hand side. But the Cromwell keeps up the fire on the Sherman, and its morale eventually breaks as well and it withdraws. And I've also ordered the second Pak to move a bit further forward into the tree line there to try and get a better view of them. The Canadians are heavily reinforcing this centre road, as you can see now, and they're moving the ram forward finally. So the Pak 38 got covering that road, manages to engage it and drive it back, while in the far left the Pak there keeps up the fire on the Wolverine and the Sherman as they fall back. And my latest reinforcement, a Jagged Panzer IV, is moving up into that vicinity. So my second Pak has now moved into that tree line, and it's in a position to engage the Wolverine, keep up the pressure on it. So that's fallen back. The Sherman manages to recover morale slightly, but then loses it again. So with the two Pak 38s working together, they're able to drive the Canadian armour back, and I've brought up a resupply truck there for the Cromwell in particular. In the town I've now got a good solid defence line, but I do lose one of the two Panzer IVs that was closing off the right flank. There's more Canadian armour moving in through the town there. On the left, the Wolverine and the Sherman have pulled well back, and the Cromwell and Jagdpanzer begin pushing the infantry back. But the Sherman manages to recover its morale again, and that starts to move forward. This is the centre road. The Ram is moving up again along with a couple of infantry squads. The pack does what it can to hold them back while it's waiting for support, but the infantry gets into range and tries to suppress the anti-tank gun. But it's able to keep up firing the Ram, keep that at distance. So the Ram begins to fall back after those few shots. The packs on the left are now both firing in the Sherman as the Cromwell and the Jagdpanzer target the infantry. And on the right I've laid more smoke to prevent long range fire into the town, so the Canadians turn their attention to the Panzer Grenadiers pushed forward on the right flank. The Panzer IVs providing suppression fire for the infantry, but there's a Wolverine and light armour further back still be able to shoot in and pin those troops. My mortar's moved up a bit further and it's now adds its fire to the Panzer IV's fire to try and suppress those units. My line's looking a bit thinner now. Good strong positions though, but the Canadians are caught in the open, and the leader squads still providing good support. On the left flank, my packs have dealt with the armour, and the Cromwell and the Jagdpanzer forced back the infantry again, but there's more armour in the way though. It looks like a Sherman and another Ram in the centre with infantry following up. The Jagdpanzer and the Cromwell work well in partnership there. Just would have been good if I had a bit more mobile units that could have moved forward to try and press an advantage on this side. Back in the town I've smoked off the units in front of the town again, and again the Canadians focus a push to the right. And I use the mortar to try and pin their infantry, and you can see I've got another two Panzer IVs moving up to support. The two new Panzer IVs, they're clearly very good friends who do everything together. They can't bear to be more than a metre apart. So these two tanks move up and join the third one there just to the left. And there's a beat up half track, you can see that's still active, so I've got a pretty strong deterrent there to any Canadian push as they blow up in the light vehicles and suppress the infantry. So quite quickly deal with numerous threats there. The Cromwell and the Jagdpanzer here, just to the bottom left, they're now firing on infantry in the centre, but the 3rd Pack 38 that was there had already been destroyed by a shot from the Ram, but the two armoured units here quickly force the infantry to fall back. But the tanks there have now forced quite a gap in the front line, and there's a tree-lined field that will screen them pretty well, the Canadian tanks, from the units that I've got on the left. So you can see they're right in the centre. I've been able to bring in a Panzerwerfer that's trying to suppress the units, but the Ram there is already in that field, so it's totally blocked off from the left hand side. It's in quite a safe position. So it's going to be imperative for me to deal with that. So the Jagdpanzer and Cromwell now engaging the infantry on the centre road, but there's a Sherman moving up that road. Luckily he runs straight into fire from the two Pack 38s that I've got there, and it's quickly suppressed and then taken out. So I'm now trying to push the Jagdpanzer into a position to stem the advance in the centre as the Cromwell continues to target the infantry and keep it back. And over in the town we've beaten back another Canadian assault and we're waiting for the next push. They move a Wolverine out towards the right flank, you can see, towards the top of the screen, and one of our Panzer IVs engages an armoured car moving over towards the town. It's fired on by the Wolverine. Panzer survives, but it is forced to fall back into cover. And it falls back quite a way. Ends up going behind some bocage. I've brought in more infantry on the right to send, and I send that towards the centre to try and deal with this Canadian advance. But unfortunately the Panzer IV on the right hand side that was fallen back moved right into line of sight of a 17-pounder and was knocked out. But on the bright side, I've managed to save up enough points to bring in Tiger Whitman to rescue the centre for us. So he hides his tank in a bush, as he does, and after a couple of warm-up shots he knocks out one of the rams. And that's him, he's got his eye in now. The Cromwell and the Jagdpanzer keep on suppressing the infantry, which leaves that remaining ram isolated. And the Panzer Grenadiers begin to push up as Tiger Whitman moves forward on the centre there. Over by the town, the Canadian armour is firing on my infantry from long range, and the Wolverine on the right moves up as well. The two remaining Panzer IVs engage the Wolverine now from their position here, and they're able to knock it out. It does manage to go off a shot that hits one of my Panzers but doesn't really damage it. On the left, things are looking a bit more secure than they were before. The infantry in the centre has been driven well back, and the Jagdpanzer knocks out a Wolverine that had been moving up. My Panzer Werfer's now in position to support the town, and it fires a salvo that forces back and destroys the Canadian units. Tiger Whitman has managed to link up the Panzer Grenadiers in the centre, but a Panzer IV that was following him didn't manage to elude the fire from the ram. The Jagdpanzer did win the shootout with the Sherman though, and Whitman moves up towards the centre to deal with that ram in that field. At the town, the Canadians have built up another strong force and they're laying down more heavy fire, and my own ranks are beginning to look a bit depleted, so I've moved the command car over to make sure it doesn't get separated from the rest of the forces there. And the Panzer Werfer's out of ammo, so I'm moving it up to link up with the munitions truck behind the town, and I've got another two Panzer IVs coming in there to support. There is more Canadian light armour pushing in to the left from the centre, but they run into fire from the Cromwell and the pack. So there's now a massive Canadian force built up by the town, and my Panzer Grenadiers are barely clinging on, but the SPW-223 is invaluable there, keeping the infantry in the fight. The rate of fire is murderous, and it eventually wipes out one squad, so I'm now pretty weak on the left of the town. Luckily I've managed to pin down the infantry on the right, so they can't take advantage. I'll move a half-track over as a sort of last-ditch defence to that flank of the town, but it moves right into line of sight of the Sherman, and it's destroyed. On the left I begin pushing the Cromwell and the Jagdpanzer forward to try and encircle the ram, but the Canadians have a 17-pounder in the rear area that targets the Cromwell. So there's a brief exchange of fire. The Cromwell almost suppresses the anti-tank gun, but doesn't quite manage it, and with that one of the key units for me in the battle is gone. But I was so glad that I swapped the Cromwell in for the Firefly. So I now decide to push the Jagdpanzer into the centre away from that 17-pounder and move the pack slightly to the right to cover the road instead. And I've also sent Tiger Whitman up that road to deal with this ram. Well, he pushes through the blockage, draws a bead on him. Ram's getting ready to return to open fire, but doesn't manage it. But the crazy jagged panzer has stopped to duke it out with a 17-pounder. I just don't understand that at all. So again, there's a bit of exchange of fire, but fortunately the jagged panzer doesn't come off the worst. I think that did manage to suppress the gun, because it did manage to sort of continue on. At the town I've brought in the reinforcing panzers on the left side this time to plug the gap there, and I'm still pinning the Canadian infantry with the mortars and machine gun fire. But another one of my squads is eliminated and things begin to look pretty grim. I can't believe how many units the AI has been able to throw into the fight, and essentially it's now just a single Panzer IV that's pinning down the Canadians, while the other one lurks behind the building watching for moves to the flank. To the left, my panzers have engaged the infantry and the light armour, and they don't really look threatening there. And my Panzer Werfer is finally resupplied and unleashes another rocket salvo over the church. And once again, the Canadians are sent running with that barrage. But you can see I've got a really tenuous hold in the town. The rocket attack has bought me some more time, but the Canadians are running en masse and being harassed by fire from the panzers to the left. So I'm hoping that I'm going to be able to hold on a bit, but then 17-pounder appears and takes out one of the panzers, and I can't risk the other one going the same way, so I pull it in behind the buildings. In the centre I've re-established control, but the Canadians now have a wedge of territory down in the left flank. And my latest reinforcement is a Wolfram 40 that I'm moving up again to support the town, but I badly need to bring in more infantry to hold the town, and also need something to reclaim that left flank. But with infantry driven back, I've retasked the mortar to target the 17-pounder. It's not as lucky as it was earlier with the 6-pounder, but it does manage to force it to fall back. And as the left flank, which had been quiet for so long, I'd moved the packs more towards the centre. So when a Canadian Achilles appears on the left, I hope they're going to be able to deal with it from that range. In the town, they were framming as soon as it's in a decent position, send in a salvo towards the Canadians where they were regrouping. Again, the results are devastating, and it lets me survive without reinforcements for a bit longer. On the left, the pack engages the Achilles when it moves into range. They exchange a couple of shots, but and the pack is eventually knocked out by a near miss. So my left flank is now looking vulnerable, and I'm thinking about sending Whitman and the Jagdpanzer over in that direction, but I've got the points to call in a couple of tanks and move them up the left. The one pack I've got left, it's low in ammo, it's only got one man crewing it, and it manages to disable the Achilles with its first shot, suppresses it with its second shot, knocks out its weapon with the third shot, and then with the fourth shot it brews it up. So that guy gets the Iron Cross. And things are looking better on the left again with that, but there's still a load of armoured vehicles heading towards the town. The munitions truck has resupplied both the rocket launchers, and they're preparing to fire again. And there's an APC apparently can see the Panzer Werfer and opens up on it with machine gun fire. There's a Sherman moving to the right of the town, and it's spotted by my Panzer IV. They engage each other, and fortunately the Sherman comes off the worst this time. So I'm bringing in two tanks on the left. I've got a Tiger and a Panzer IV. I don't want to push them further forward without support in case there's any concealed infantry or anti-tank guns. And the Canadians in the centre begin to move forward, but the Jagdpanzer quickly deals with infantry. Back in the town, the Wolframmer is reloaded and fires. This time I target the units to the left of the town which were beginning to threaten the infantry and half-tanks that was trying to move up in the centre. And over on the left I begin to push the tanks forward to reclaim the territory there. We already have a slight advantage, and I decide it's time to roll up the left flank, and I'm also pushing the Jagdpanzer forward to try and take out the Sherman. That's got the damaged transmission. That's been holding the centre of the Canadian line for a while. But I've forgotten about the 17 Pounder, but luckily we managed to take it out with a single shot. And again at the town, the units out with the Wurf hammer are falling back, and the units on the right are now pushing forward, but another good salvo from the Panzerwerfer puts an end to that advance. And Achilles does push through the barrage though. Jagdpanzer's now got line of sight on the Sherman, which must have lost its main gun, and it takes it out with the second shot. And it then turns to the right to attack the flank of the Canadians before the town. So I'm now moving up more infantry to reinforce the town, and I'm bringing in a couple of units on the left hand side as well. The Achilles to the right of the town keeps advancing, but it was severely stressed by the rocket barrage, and a single shot from the Panzer IV sends it into retreat. The Panzer takes its time lining up its second shot, and it manages to take out the Achilles. And a Sherman then appears, and that's taken out as well. So again, the command star from the 223's made a difference, and I'm sending Whitman now over towards the town into a position where he can threaten the town and still cover the centre. And I'm also pushing the remaining Pack 38 further forward to try and engage the mortar carrier that's sat on the left flank doing nothing for the whole battle. My infantry reinforcements have now reached the town as I catch sight of more Canadian units moving in. Neutral view there showed just there's still a hell of a lot there. An awful lot of Canadian units. But luckily Tiger Whitman announces his presence by shooting in from the left flank. And over in the far left, my infantry has now arrived to support the tanks, and I begin to move them forward. And I'm hoping it'll be reasonably plain sailing, and I'm pushing up the recce squad as well. But there's still infantry in the trees there, as I feared there might be. But fortunately the fire from the tanks and the infantry is enough to suppress them quickly. On the right, Whitman's really making his presence felt, blasting anything he sees. Vehicles explode and infantry is suppressed immediately as soon as he spots it. So another Sherman appears in the centre there on the road, but it holds back, and my advance on the left hand side is able to continue with the Canadian infantry there in full retreat now. I'm laying smoke with the mortar again to cut off long range fire from the Canadians, and to add to their woes I've now brought up a Wesp that opens up on them. So it looks now like the Canadians are moving reinforcements over towards the left, so I push the Jagdpanzer forward to try and cut off that road. There's plenty of traffic on it, and the Jagdpanzer begins to pick it all off. It's amazing how it deals with small, fast-moving vehicles so accurately. So the Panzerwerfer is reloaded, and it joins the Vesp in crushing the latest advance towards the town. So again, you can see all the units falling back there, or being destroyed. In the centre, the Jagdpanzer goes about its work efficiently, and it's got protection from some infantry to the right there. the left, the tanks are pushing back the Canadian infantry that's been spotted as the Panzer Grenadiers push up towards the rear. And back at the town, my Panzer IV engages the Canadian Shermans while Whitman continues to pick off units from the flank. He's got a recce squad and Panzer Grenadiers supporting him to make sure he doesn't get ambushed. So the Canadians are continuing to pour forward towards the town as I push forward in the centre and on the left flank. You can see in the neutral mode that there's still two units holding that tree line in the centre, creating a bit of a bulge. So I don't want to move the tanks too close to that, just in case. There's also the Sherman moving up slightly towards the rear. And the Sherman's the only thing I can see at this point, really. So Whitman's found himself a nice shady spot to destroy the Canadians from. But I would hate to be one of those recce troops standing right by the muzzle of his 88mm cannon. Jagdpanzer's also merrily picking off Canadian vehicles from its spot. So my Panzer Grenadiers on the left have now spotted the half-track, and I decide to send them into cover in the tree line and deploy the Panzer IV over to support them. I'm going to keep the Tiger moving towards the centre. Neutral mode shows that I might finally have the advantage in terms of the number of units. But over at the town you can see there's an AA gun being pushed forward in the right flank, and I'm beginning to wonder if the AI is running out of any other units to send up now. I think it's a Tripolston that they're moving there. In the centre, the Jagdpanzer finally gets eyes on the Sherman, and it manages to take it out after a couple of shots. Over on the right, I'd brought up a Tiger E, and that takes out the Tripolston with a couple of rounds. But a Canadian mosquito attack almost succeeds in suppressing my artillery, and does force some of the units to fall back that were in the centre of the town. Artillery survived though. Over on the left, the Canadian reinforcements have decided not to advance any further, but are moving over towards the centre. In the town, the Tiger dispatches another Sherman, and then that Tiger and Whitman begin mopping up the few units that are left there. I bring in an ME-109 to make a gratuitous rocket attack on a supply truck, essentially just for the cinematics, since I've not had one in this battle. And the advance of the Tiger on the left towards that wooded area seems to push the infantry out of the forest into the sights of the Jagdpanzer. It begins firing on them. And in the town, the last few infantry squads still try to press forward, but they're mown down by the Tigers. And the Panzer IV that's still there. But the last word in the battle, it goes fittingly, I suppose, to the Jagdpanzer, which destroys the last Canadian tank. You can see that the field of fire there for that Tiger is perfect. There's nothing threatening it at all. And this is the Jagdpanzer finishing the battle. So clearly it was a much more successful battle for the 12th SS-Panzer Battlegroup this time. I didn't quite reach 2,000 points. We did hit the time limit, 40 minutes. I think I had 1,985 points, something in that sort of region. But I had over 7,000 kills and I lost only 1,600. So it just shows you the amount of advantage in terms of reinforcement points the hard AI has. So thanks to everyone that gave me advice in the battle group and on how to play as Armoured Division. I think I've managed to take quite a bit of that advice on board, and I hope you enjoyed this battle. Please leave me a comment and like or dislike the video as you choose, and I hope that you'll support and encourage more content by subscribing to the channel if you haven't already done that, and I hope to see you again next time. Cheers.